Here either way. All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we specialize in the comic, TV, film, music, and video game industries. Of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso, and we are joined today on another amazing podcast show, internet show on Two Geeks Talking, of course, with a person that hasn't been on the show in 5 years. And, well, you know, it's not my fault, but it's great to have him back either way. We're joined today by the artist originally from Eben 07. You've heard him on the show before. He's back with a master's degree in English. He's also back with a brand new comic called Long John, which is at longjohncomic.com. Welcome, D. Bethel, to the show. How you doing there, Dan?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on the show. And let's just not assign blame. I think everybody's here can share the blame equally, and we'll just pass that.
There is no blame when it comes to reoccurring guests. It just comes down to scheduling conflicts.
Right.
You know?
In fact, I was just homeless and showed up at his door. And he's like, well, we'll record in that other room. No.
As you can tell, it's nice and dark here and nice and sunny over there. It's a wonderful. Yeah, the light, it burns. It burns.
Right. My blinds are closed, by the way. It's out of control.
Crazy stuff there. You know, hey, it's been far too long there. You've had a lot going on in your life. You know, for those that don't know, well, a little bit about yourself, let's give a brief synopsis of you as you, and of course of longjohncomic.com.
I'm not particularly interesting.
Oh, come on.
I'm like, the way I just kind of describe myself now is that I've set up a career for myself where I am simultaneously a comicer and a writing instructor. That's what I do. Like you said, I got my master's degree in English composition and rhetoric, and I teach at the local state university composition classes. So all those freshman and second year writing classes that no one wants to take, but I absolutely love to teach for some reason. Wow. But it's great fun. But what I like about that is that you know, when I went to grad school, it was mostly about I was going to go into creative writing. By that point, I'd been doing Eben 07 for a couple of years, and I knew what I wanted to do was just talk about writing professionally, and so I went to creative writing. And like, I could teach at a junior college or a community college with a degree in that. Then I found out there's actually a program dedicated to talking about writing. I'm like, all right, I can do that. But let me turn off my fan. Sorry, it's loud to sell in here. And this program just worked out for me, and it was kind of just a direct angle into teaching writing. So I balanced my time back and forth. Obviously, at certain points of the year, teaching takes over my time because I've got 40 papers to grade. And but I'm based out of Sacramento here. As I teach at CSU Sacramento. But yeah, as far as Long John, it's a very, very old idea that I had from this sounds totally stupid, but it's from a dream I had back in 2002, I believe. It was 2002, actually. And all I had a dream was just this weird, like, cartoon cowboy shooting guns. I'm like, this is rad. So, I punched my mic. So I woke up and just drew it in my sketchbook and then just lay dormant there for about 10 or 11 years. But Long John it's a Western about a famous gunslinger, Long John Walker, who's called Long John because he can hit a target at a rifle's distance, at a very long distance, with just a normal revolver. And he and his posse, who are called the Johns, because he's got his sort of the mouth of the team, the guy that does all the deals, who's called Juan John, and he's got the sort of the ears and the feet of the team, the tracker, the guy that gets them around, called Johnny Mono, who's a Native American, who's actually native to the region in which this comic takes place. But that's all interesting stuff. They're kind of the famous pulp heroes that they wrote dime novels about. But the comic isn't about that. The comic is about when Long John wakes up one morning and his friends are gone. He's next to Mono Lake, or a highly saline lake in Northern California. His friends are gone, his stuff is gone, and his clothes are gone. And he's just got blood coming down half his face, and it's just kind of a mystery starting from there, going, what happened, who did this, and how do I recover what was taken from me? And that's why the tagline of the comic is losing everything, changes everything. So it's kind of you could look at it as sort of a weird commentary on, not to get too heady here, of like materialism, or just like more importantly, identity, because the whole entire first chapter, which is available now online and as a book, is about him wandering into a nearby town saying, I'm Long John, and they're like, bullshit. Oh, pardon my language.
Sorry.
You don't look like Long John. I know Long John. I've heard stories about him, and you're just a loser with no clothes. We're gonna beat you up, right? And so it's about what happens when the sort of protective shell is taken away, and you have to be kind of who you are in a hostile world, so to speak. So, but it's got its fair share of action and comedy, like a good comic always does. Hopefully, it's a good comic. I don't know, but that's sort of the Long John kind of basis. And what it's about.
The long and the short of it.
Right. It's okay.
But
puns are okay.
I have to get my puns in somehow.
Fair enough.
So this is something that's been in the making for a while now. It's good to see that you've started on a project that you're passionate about. I mean, I'm looking at the art style. Obviously, it has tones of what you worked on with Eben 07, but there's still a brand new taking to it, because it's not just the style that we're used to with back in Eben 07 days. You've evolved in terms of being an artist, and definitely the storytelling as the writer that you are is you've really fleshed it out. Like it's a very easy pacing. It almost kind of reminds me of like a Ramon Perez style with what he works on.
Oh, right. Oh, so, wow. I'll take that. Yeah, well, thanks. It was a huge conscious choice to change the style specifically. But I think as much as I might try, my style, whatever it is, I couldn't get rid of. I think the biggest approach is actually, in this case, I approached Eben 07, which I did with Evan Burgoon, who's been on the show since as well. We did that comic from 2007 to 2013, and released something like 6 books. And with that, I was really drawing upon my limited animation background. I wanted clean lines. I wanted every panel to kind of look like a frozen cell from what could be an animated version. But I also changed a lot of sort of my tools as I was doing that. But there's always very sort of smooth lines, thick to thin. I was using dip pens mostly to ink, so I could just really get nice, smooth contours and also mimic the line that I got with Photoshop, because I actually started that comic completely digitally and moved to physical inking. And so I really wanted to keep that aesthetic and not look too different from what people had become used to.
I think one of the main things that I find interesting about this comic itself is your use of shadows is really cinematic. I could see this as an actual in a film, to be perfectly honest, because the way your angles are with your different perspectives, the way your shadows are coming across the body itself. A lot of comics, while they do shadows with the people themselves, they don't usually rely on the light sources for that matter. They kind of forget about things that light is coming through, or maybe they just don't have time to physically do it.
Right. I think I'm glad you actually pointed that out. That's something I work really hard at when coloring the comic. And coloring is in quotes, because Eben 07 was a full color comic, and that was a huge learning curve for me. And when I was sort of brainstorming the mood for this comic, I was thinking about going color with it because it was what I was used to, but I wanted to make pages faster. I wanted to be a much faster artist than I was before. Plus, I just like the tone. Sort of the mood that being a what I call kind of a tritone comic. It's the only colors I use are, and this says wobbly definitions, but grays, a beige, and black and white, which for some reason I'm folding into one. To actually tell the story more effectively, and also to be unique. Actually, one of the things I wanted to do is even though the shadows seem to be probably the most realistic in terms of the coloring of the comic, I really do take into account light sources, because I don't have a wide range of colors to draw upon. But one thing I wanted to, and I talk about this a lot in the comic, I write copious amounts of notes beneath each page because that's what I do. And one thing I wanted to do with the colors is actually make the colors less representational and make them more expressive, so that the coloring will change depending on what this page is trying to do. Plus, that takes some stress off, because I'm like, okay, his long johns are always this color of gray, or this shade of gray, I should say. I'm like, I don't want to be beholden to that, because that's just representative. Why don't I just go full color with that? And so if you look at some of the fight scenes, I pull color out. I take color away, just to sort of enhance the kinetic energy that I want in that page. Or sometimes I really add on layers of shading and stuff like that. But where was I going with that? But it's something that I thought about really hard, and especially in the new pages where it's taking place at night. Shadows is sort of the dominant coloring methodology that I'm using. It's like, how much can we put in the shade? What should be completely black? What should just be really, really heavily shadowed? It's been a really fun kind of experiment, especially since I'm not working with man-made light sources, like with Eben 07, you're in a building or you're in a bunker or something like that. Here it's just like it's a lantern that's using oil. I'm like, okay, this is the only light we're getting in the scene. How is it going to work? But it's I'm using color much more as a mood for this comic than I have before, and it's really, really fun.
What I find, I just got past the first chapter there and went into the middle chapter between 1 and 2 there. And of course, the art style has changed. The coloring has definitely changed, and the hatching is completely different. I see, obviously, there's a secondary artist that has helped you with this. So who was the artist that was working on this to help fill in the gaps?
Right. So the artist on that sort of middle chapter between chapters 1 and 2 is a guy named Josh Toby. He's a painter. He's a friend of mine from way back. We kind of grew up together as artists, and we definitely, as you can probably see, we went very different directions with the art. He definitely went much more in the realm of sort of fine art and painting, and he's also done a lot of drawing, mainly with pen and ink. Mm-hmm. And he does, how do I describe his art? He's a symbolist with hints of surrealism. He really likes people like Stanislaw Baczynski and H.R. Giger and like kind of stuff that really dives into dark places. And which is perfect for this character in the comic. Now, what the side story that he draws is a story from the point of view of a character we meet at the very beginning of chapter 1, a character named Hellrider Jackie. She's this lady in all black riding a horse with a scythe and a huge bonnet and a skull mask. And what we're seeing through her chapter that Josh is drawing for me is, what does the world look like through her eyes? It's a very desolate world in the comic, but it's actually true to life. This is based on a real place in the eastern Sierra Nevada, in a place called the Mono Basin, the area surrounding Mono Lake. And so it's not a historical drama, because I'm not actually using real history. I'm not being too faithful to like building placement, because it's actually really hard to find that kind of stuff anyway. But the places they go are real places. But when it comes to this Hellrider Jackie side story, I'm just saying, I say to Josh, go nuts, right? Make the most twisted stuff that you can, and see what. And the more twisted, the better. And actually, the next story we do together, which will be between chapter 2 and 3, it's going to go even more off the rails. So I'm really excited to kind of get to that point. 1, I don't have to draw, which is really nice. but 2, it's also great to see him push his own limitations and make interesting comics, even if it's not for everybody. I really wanted people to like kind of hate it. Also, it's like, this is weird and gross and disgusting. But I didn't get that. Everybody was way too accommodating. Thanks a lot, Internet.
Oh no, the Internet likes something. I have to think of a way to change.
Really, I've been lied to.
Oh come on, everyone tells the truth on the Internet, right?
Perhaps too often.
But not enough in that case. No, I could definitely see the illustration style, especially the cross hatching was definitely noticeable on. I mean, to be honest, it's a beautiful segue between it, because not only do you see the craveness of both of your works. I mean, obviously you're very two distinctive creators, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he's willing to go into this particular realm is great to have in a story like this. It gives a nice breath to the comic, gives you a sense of you can step back from chapter one, kind of think onto the themes and the motifs that you're touching upon, especially with materialism and when it comes to knowing your place in the world or trying to change your place in the world, for that matter. At least that's what I gathered in chapter one. Is rather interesting and unique in that case. As you can tell, I've been going to university a little too long lately.
It's okay, I support it. It keeps people like me employed.
Fair enough. At least it's a Canadian system, though. So, we have to pay off the penguins and the polar bears and all that stuff. So.
They need money too.
Or fish or whatever.
Fair enough, yeah.
But that aside, though, this is something that I see as obviously a long-term project. Is it being the writer that you are, have you fleshed everything out, or do you see this as a 2 or 3 novel thing, or one omnibus type overarching story?
It's going to be one complete book. I'm aiming at about between 130 and 150 pages.
Nice.
And it's a complete story. I don't plan on coming back to it when I'm done. But it's a complete story. But in terms of how much is fleshed out, I'm trying to maintain this balance of I have a skeleton in terms of I wouldn't want to call it an outline because it's very sketchy, but I know where I want to go. But when I sit down to actually script out or lay out pages, I'm sorry, not pages, but chapters, I'm allowing enough room to add stuff, take stuff out, change things, because I don't want it to be stale. I know how I write. I know how I'm able to get things out. And one of the things that's plagued me as a creative person, and I'm sure has plagued a lot of people trying to do creative stuff, is that you kind of burn yourself out on it. You think too hard about it. You plan too hard. And that has done me in more than once. And the nice thing about coming from something like Eben 07 to this, where I'm changing the art style, going for a much more illustrative art style. Like I said, with Eben 07, I was much more influenced by animation. With Long John, I'm actually influenced by comics more than anything else. I'm like, I want this to look like a comic. And a lot of European influence and stuff like that has worked its way in there, because I have my art beginning started with 90s superhero comics, and I wanted to get away from that, try to sort of be more bare, try to be more expressive, ultimately have expressive lines just like I want to have expressive colors. But with that in mind, I want to actually, like I said earlier, I want to write and draw this thing as quickly as possible, warts and all. I don't want, it's not I guess it's epic in the sense that it's a large story, but it's not, I'm not going to iron out everything. I'm going to stumble, I'm going to fall, but it's going to be rad the entire time, right? It's going to be telling the story I want, which I think is what's adding to the sort of Western comic idea, is that there's one of the things I wanted to focus on is that it's a Western. There's no aliens, there's no monsters, there's no mutants, there's no space, right? And that's just because that's not the comic I want to tell, right? But that's one of the things I was worried about. I'm like, who the hell wants to read a Western? And for me, I'm like, well, my drawing looks different. It's very cartoony, and it's not what you expect out of a Western, which those comics tend to be very realistic looking. I don't have the patience for that. So, yeah, I kind of told it in the best way I could. I stress over some of the background details because that's not the stuff I'm most confident with. But it seems to have been getting a lot of good reaction from people that haven't, that would say they aren't fans of Westerns either. Because it's about characters. I'm not worrying about there is a plot, but it's very bare bones, like a lot of Westerns are. It's mostly about characters and doing something different with the character, such as taking a Clint Eastwood badass and just taking all the aesthetic badassery away from him. It's like, what happens if you take everything that makes that character dangerous and plop him in a room full of people with guns, right? And the first chapter very much kind of deals with that theme. And this new chapter is really about dealing with, in a sense, trauma. Dealing with it's what does a badass do when he actually gets behind a closed door and can deal with being bushwhacked and abandoned and humiliated as he experienced in the first chapter. So that's the kind of stuff we get to look forward in this chapter. It's very, very character based in this one, very emotionally based, whereas the first chapter was very kind of socially focused.
There has been a few webcomics I know in the past that have done westerns fairly well. Obviously, I think the most notable would be Guns of Shadow Valley, Dave Wachter and Jim Clark, as well as oh yes. I got to get him back on too, but that's beside the point. You're our guest today.
Thank you. Yeah. But you should get them back on.
And then I think there was a side story with Adam Black with his Locust comic as well too.
Okay.
He did something with the main character in the sub character, side character in the same story. But those are the only ones that I can really recall as of late. But it's not been a genre that a lot of people have touched upon, and I don't know if it's because it's just not popular, or it's just not something people want to take the time to research. The only other thing would be, I guess, Jim Henson's manuscript, A Tale of Sand, that Ramon Perez did for that last manuscript. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, what helps is that I think the Western genre has a lot of trappings that maybe people find corny right now and cheesy, which is fine. And they're not wrong. But I think the thing that saved my comic is that I'm not necessarily researching Westerns to tell a Western story. And right before the comic came out, I updated for the week leading up to it with what I call the Long John Primer, which is like, these are the things you kind of need to know to kind of understand this comic just on an aesthetic first impression kind of level. And I talked about the area of California where it takes place. And I talked about, in terms of the movies, I talked a little bit about Westerns, but I talked about like the weird Westerns that I really liked, like Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter, which is it's a surreal Western. I think that's the only way to describe it. It's really interesting. But it does take place actually where the story takes place as well. But the biggest influences are Akira Kurosawa samurai movies and
Westerns.
Right, and noir. And because those are the things I've actually consumed more than Westerns. I like Westerns a lot, but I tend to be very narrow. I like Clint Eastwood Westerns because I like the strange it's not subdued masculinity, but it's this very kind of in your face bravado that it's uncompromising. And what it ultimately does is, maybe this is me getting too English teacher here as well, but it always, the masculinity and the bravado, while badass, always lead to disaster. and Clint Eastwood is really good at tapping into that and showing different angles on a situation, which is something I wanted to do with this comic as well.
Yeah, and you definitely, like I said, it looks like a film. It could easily be shot as a film with the way you have your angles, you have your perspectives. I mean, if you want me to write the screenplay for it, I'll be happy to. I'm good with that. So
we'll negotiate contracts afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll do it over some Canadian maple syrup or something like that.
I'll accept beer.
But right, that works for me. It's cheap here. But overall, though, I really think that it's something that people can easily get into. It's not something that you have to worry about long exposition or long intrinsic characters, at least not as of yet, because you're just starting the story overall. So, I mean, I could easily see them doing it. But let's kind of take a step back from the comic here and let's go into a little more of your philosophical aspect of yourself here. Okay. When it comes down to it, everyone has one person that kind of sets them on the path to where they are today. Who is that for you?
Whoa, this just got heavy. Okay, one person that set me on the path. You're just talking about, because I think it's. I might have to at least choose two because of my two sort of separate angles here. With regard to my the stuff I do, but with comics, I know the big sea change for me, and what actually changed my philosophy incredibly, and the way I approach comics, and even the comics I read. And it seems kind of strange, but it's a comic that Image put out. That's starting, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, called Prophet. It's actually a reboot of an old Rob Liefeld comic, but this reboot was helmed by two guys at the start, Brandon Graham, known for King City and Multiple Warheads, really, and a lot of porn comics before that. It's really strange. And Simon Roy, who I had known from a long time ago when at my local comic book store got this really strange one-shot book called Jan's Atomic Heart. And it was really weird. And then when he showed up in Prophet, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm interested now. Excuse me. But what they brought to Prophet was not only an interesting sort of European aesthetic, but they brought this really interesting philosophy that Brandon Graham, if you know anything about him, he's not a quiet guy on Twitter, and he really does not like the modern comics industry. And he's very much about like, do your own stuff. I'm not necessarily as militant as he is about this, but he's like, artists, you're visual storytellers. This is a visual medium. You can write your own comics. And he's really kind of actually trying to break away from that writer-artist divide. He's like, this is a medium that could and should be monopolized by visual storytellers, and you don't need someone to write the words for you to be able to do this. And for me, where kind of like I was saying before, as a creative person, I'd never really had a lot of confidence. And obviously, I got a lot of confidence just as a storyteller with Eben 07. But knowing that I could actually finish comics and of course going through school and like, oh, I think I'm actually pretty good at what I do and I've read enough and I've studied this a lot. I'm like, I think I can actually do this pretty well. And hearing people like Brandon Graham, Simon Roy, other artists on there, the big one is Yanni Milaniani, a Greek artist on Prophet. They're all kind of doing the sounding call for independent creators to kind of stand up for themselves. And I'm like, yeah, and so one of the things you see early on in my page notes, again, that are very, very long and intricate for every page on Long John, there was sort of this weird learning curve I went between the end of Eben 07 and the beginning of Long John, where I'm just kind of psyching myself up. I'm like, yes, I can do this, and was really surprised pleasantly with the results I was getting. I'm like, yes, I can do this, and now I'm willing to, well, now that school's out, I'm willing to kind of bang the drum and make some noise too, because it was a defining moment for me that there's so many people out there in terms of readers and creators that are just the paradigm of writer art. You need to have a writer and you need to have an artist, and for some reason those two can't meet or blend. That needs to be taken down in a sense. In some ways, I think we need to open it up more, and I think that is happening much more. That's why I don't like to necessarily. This is me being pretentious. Don't like to call myself the writer artist. I call myself either the creator or just I call myself a comicer, right? I think we've come up with this new word in the last couple of years, comicer, that I really, really like. It's a person that makes comics, and they can cover everything. One thing, it doesn't matter, but it does kind of hide that in a sense paradigm, or in some ways a hierarchy that really shouldn't be there. That especially because Eben and I shared the writing duties of Eben 07, and one of the things that was it wasn't annoying. It was just something that was like, oh, yep, that's the public consciousness when they come to the table and they just go, okay, you do the writing and you do the art. I'm like, well, we both write. Yeah, I do the drawing, but but it's a collaborative process, and it's a very hard concept for a lot of people to understand. I sound like on my own because I know I can do it, right? So Prophet, and when I say Prophet, I mean all the creators behind it, was a huge boost of esteem and confidence that I needed to actually make Long John happen. That's probably the best thing I can bring up right now. I could talk about like English composition theorists and stuff like that, but they really don't have much importance on this. But I think that's actually a really good question, something I hadn't really thought too much about before. I've been talking endlessly about Prophet on the website, but yeah, I'm like, these guys are actually beacon. So that's it. Prophet, read it. It's great.
You said you had another one though as well.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of one for my comicking and one for the teaching and stuff like that. If you want to look into some really interesting philosophy of pedagogy, which I do actually, I think I share a lot in terms of how I teach with how I make comics, because my teaching is, there's the old sort of idea of what writing essays are, and it's about, here's a format, fill it. The 5-paragraph essay is what it's usually called. And that's actually getting shot down quite a bit. One of the first things I have my students read is an essay called Unteaching, the 5-paragraph essay.
Nice.
And all that writing is, no matter the format, no matter the genre, no matter the community, is being clear. And all you need to do to be a good writer is who you're writing for, even if it's some nebulous idea, and how can you speak to them efficiently. It's not about compromising your voice. It's not about compromising your ideas. It's about tailoring your voice so that you can make that person, whether it's one person or 100 people, understand what you're saying clearly, and so that they can either respond or use it, right? And so a lot of talk is spent talking about sort of freeing up your mind from thinking of writing as one thing, and learning as one thing. And if you want to dive deep into this, there's a really sort of the guiding philosopher of modern composition pedagogy is a guy named Paulo Freire. And I won't try to spell it because it's Portuguese and it's really hard to spell. But he wrote this wonderful book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he's like, he went into this farming community that was where most people were not educated. And he's like, how do we, and they tried to go to school, but they weren't gaining any footholds because the method was not working for them. And so how do we break through to get them to be expressive contributors to their society? And that sort of goes into this idea of like, it's not about getting a format with blanks you fill in. It's about being aware. It's about critical thinking and about what am I trying to say and how do I say it the best, right? And so, I mean, actually it goes back to Long John. It's been a really long project, and various times throughout the last 13 years that it's been around, I tried doing it as a when I was doing animation. I tried doing it as a little animated short. I tried writing it as a novel, but I kind of realized that no, this is a comic. Especially once I sort of understood what comics are, instead of just trying to make a comic out of animation. I'm like, comics can do a certain thing. There's a way to use these stories and to tell these stories. And Long John actually fits really, really well in this context. And so, since Long John is my expression of this idea as clearly as I can make it, which is as a comic. But I have no doubt it could be a great movie.
Well, hey, I'm up for it. I'll be happy to do that. And it's something I'm working on with a few other things I've done thanks to school as well. Right. So you find the opportunities in the craziest places, and
right.
You work with people that you admire and you've worked with, and you haven't killed yet, so it works out well.
Right.
Moving on then, when it comes to success, and let me phrase it this way,
right?
From a professional standpoint, you're very professional in terms of a comic creator. You've had 6 books with Eben 07. You're starting on your next project here. Yep. So from a professional standpoint, I would consider you a successful person.
Sure.
But do you consider yourself personally successful?
Yes, I think that was actually a really important conversation to have with me, for not like with myself in the darkness, but my wife has been very active in getting me the confidence as well to do this on my own. And yes, figuring out what do I want from Long John, and kind of if wishes were fishes and I could do whatever I wanted, my kind of idea is to yes, Kurt, is to finish Long John. And this is actually based on a model that I'm pointing back there because I have a couple, you can't see it because it's being nuked by the sun, but I have a couple prints of the made by the Prophet artists. I got a print that was done by Yanni Milaniani, one of the artists on Prophet, and I've got original Prophet page right behind me by Simon Roy. But Yanni Milaniani, he has a book that was a webcomic first, and actually it was really weird. I found his webcomic and I had it saved in my bookmarks, and then years later, he shows up in Prophet. I'm like, I think I know this art. Why do I know this? And I go through, it's Old City Blues, right? It's a really interesting cyberpunk kind of comic. But what he did is he just puts this stuff on the web, and it was attracting attention. And he eventually took a bunch of chapters that he'd made with, I'm guessing, sort of page views or something like that, and took it to Archaea Comics and said, look, there's an audience for this. Would you be willing to publish it? Right. And we can assume with a lot of creator-owned work, he's not necessarily expecting a lot of revenue, but at least it's out there. It's professionally produced, and anybody can get it anywhere if they want it. And that's kind of the angle I'm taking, not pursuing Long John as like, I want to get out of teaching so I can make comics all the time. That's one thing I kind of know I don't want to do because I'm so slow, and this sounds horrible to say, I don't like drawing, but it's very, very hard. It's very hard. but I would like to once it's all done, just to take it somewhere and like, there's an audience for this. And, you know, I don't know that I don't have a particular publisher in mind, but would, you know, I think it'd be beneficial to us both, I guess. And is that cocky to say? To say, like, would you like to publish this book? And if that works out, great. If not, I'll do it myself and move on to my next project. But one of the reasons why I went to grad school was to become a teacher, partially because I realized this is what I'm good at, but also not for, you know, not for nothing. It provides time if you want to take the time to actually do other stuff. I have a summer off, and I can make comics during that time. And so I'm really looking at my life as this dual career of making comics and teaching. And that's kind of all I want at this point. I would like success at both, naturally, but it's not me waiting to see which one will take, right? I'm really, the success I want is to make Long John as accurate to who I am right now as possible. And I think I'm doing that. So for me, yeah, I view it as a very successful endeavor. Expensive at times, but very successful, right? But one thing I'm going to be doing is trying to be going to more shows now that I actually have a product to sell. Nice. But yeah, just to get the word out there, because I don't have ads on my site. I don't have any sort of income other than selling stuff. So I think my push right now, my small term goal is just to try to get it out there more and see if people like it. Right. So yes, I do consider Long John right where it is right now as successful as I want it to be, which is it's going up and people are liking it, and I still have time to make it. So small goals. I like it.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I think you kind of dodged the personally successful question, but it works out for
you.
Me.
No, I can do that. Yes, I went to grad school to become a teacher, and I became a teacher. And to be a teacher at the local state university was kind of unprecedented. They hadn't hired in something like 3 years, and about 6 months after I graduated, I got an email saying, "Hey, man, positions are opening up. You should apply." Then I started teaching in the fall. I'm like, all right, this is rad. So. But yeah, being a teacher is a really interesting experience. And being a state teacher, you probably don't hear this as much as from other educators. It's working with so many students. This next semester, I'm going to have probably somewhere of 110 students just the first semester, and it's really interesting. And with so many students, it's really hard to connect with all of them, but it's always about those few that are just getting it right and seeing them grow. Last year, I actually took part in this new program that the school was doing, which is actually a year-long English class. And what I didn't expect was at the end of the year, it was kind of an emotional thing. I'm like, wow, you guys were like really angry at the beginning because they were placed. A lot of them were placed in that year-long program. So like, this is going to take a whole year, but by the end, a lot of them had grown so much and really taking to heart this idea of like, just again, the simple idea that a lot of students have a lot of difficulty understanding, or not understanding, but getting a hold of, is like, who are you talking to, and how can you say it as clearly to them as possible? Because a lot of them, once they get in front of the computer, go like, okay, I need a thesis and a topic sentence and a one quote and a transition sentence. I'm like, yeah, those are important, but that's not the most important thing. It's about being clear and seeing people really break through their own sort of ceilings, because that's what it is. We take to college, or we take into the world the limitations that we place in ourselves due to our experiences in school. When things get too hard, we go, okay, that's my level, you know. But if you really try, just like anything, if you really try and really practice and really set goals for yourself, you can really improve dramatically. And seeing those students really become effective speakers is incredibly rewarding. But it's also, teaching is the most stressful job I've ever had, because they can be super frustrating. And you can have great days, you can have horrible days, and most of the time you think it's your fault. And not realizing that's an 8 a.m. class, and maybe just 8 a.m. classes suck, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so I do if I survive through a semester, I think I've been personally successful with my job. But that was kind of one of the things, not to keep going with this, that really, for me, I was a guy that kind of, even though it was a very mutual agreement to end Eben 07 where it was, a lot of it was this weird position I was in my life at the time. When Eben 07 ended, when Eben 07 started, I was right out of college with my bachelor's degree. I'd moved across the country. I was working for Barnes and Noble selling CDs, and not really. I was a very different person than when I ended up at the end. I was really kind of hungry for anything new and different, and I still am. But just my goals changed. By the end of Eben 07, I graduated with my master's degree. I was married, and we owned a house. I'm like, oh, okay. I feel like a very different person, and it felt like the right time to start something new, to like I said earlier, to tell a story of who I am now, or from where I am now, at the very least. And that's definitely where that's a big part of where Long John came from. Because one of the things was, if I walk away from Eben 07, what am I going to do? And like a lot of creative people, I have a lot of ideas, but Long John seemed to be the one that was clicking with whatever sort of environment was surrounding me at that time. And it's very indicative of those circumstances. So, long answer. You wanted an answer to that? I gave you one.
I like long answers. I hate short answers. So and they're even better now that I have an English professor that's, talking, so I'm kind of expecting it.
Right. I apologize for any grammar mistakes I make.
That's all right. I won't fault you for your American grammar. It's perfectly fine.
I'll just add "used" to every word. Right.
Then going from success, obviously, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. How do you deal with your failures?
Drinking. No.
You'd be surprised, but that's a common answer. Actually, you wouldn't be surprised.
I think failure. I mean, the thing is with failure is that it's really a relative term, right? I think a lot of people associate failure with writer's block and not being able to create. But this kind of comes from teaching. It's this idea by a theorist named Donald Murray, who talks about the writing process, and he talks about writer's block, and what he calls it is the law of delay. What he's saying is that you're not actually blocked, you're just kind of empty. You overthought it, right? You're too close to it, and now you've got to just back away, let it cook on the back burner, but do something else where you're creating, where you're making something, right? And so I have frustrations, and it does bother me, but I don't necessarily consider them failures, because I'll just come back to it later. I just have to realize that I know I am just stuck. I'm like, I got to back away from it and come back to it with a clearer head, right? And so that's when I go write blogs or articles and whatnot. But in terms of failures, I can't really, not to brag, I can't really think of too much, is that the pages for Long John are really solid in terms of the composition, which is kind of the angle I never felt I was really confident on, or not really well schooled. I never really studied graphic design or composition, but really thinking about it, sitting down with every single page and go, how am I guiding the reader's eye? What information do I need the reader to know? And how to do that clearly is it's been a lot of work, but it's been really rewarding. And I think there probably have been a couple panels here and there where I'm like, I should have redrawn that, or I should have done that differently. But in terms of the comic, I don't really have anything I'm upset with, I don't think. Yeah, sorry. I'm amazing. Yeah.
Then I guess when it comes down to, well, you've kind of touched upon this with growth in terms of the younger generation, but let's pitch it to you this way. obviously the younger generation you're teaching the younger generation, as crazy as that is to say.
You don't want to know when my students were born. That's always the most depressing part. It's like, oh, I was in high school.
Yes, being my age and going back to university, I have a good decade and a half on a lot of people. Let's just say, get off my lawn, kids, sometimes. But my question, I think, was obviously you're teaching the younger generation, and they're looking at your work if they've followed your comics or if they've seen any of your work, and they're becoming inspired to become creative individuals themselves. The question then is, that's not my phone. The question then is, how can they inspire?
It's not my phone either.
Yeah, I know. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Ooh, that's heavy. That's an interesting question, because I guess that's one of the frustrations about teaching, at the very least, is for all the students that do find your work. Or I also teach at a for-profit art school called the Art Institute. They have a bunch of satellite campuses all over the place. And I only ever teach one class there at a time, because I'm like, this is and I teach English, actually. I'm like, this is a place where my students are all just creative people. And I think it'd be really interesting and really fun. And that's been really, really rewarding, because a lot of them go in there not being the strongest writers, because they want a different kind of education than what can be provided at the junior college or university level. And the growth I see with them is really amazing. And they're the ones that know about my comic more than anything. And a lot of them have come to me kind of asking for questions or inspiration. I'm like, I don't know, just do it, right?
Just play that Shia LaBouef film.
Just do it. Yeah, that should be my first day of class. Just walk in front of the class. Just do it. But okay, so how do we go from them to the following generation?
Yeah.
It's hard to answer, because who knows how much things will change between now and then, right? Can't even predict the advancements in entertainment consumption, media's methods of dispersal for work. Right now, I think things are just getting faster with the proliferation of like video, specifically like Vines and Instagram videos, where like between 6 and 10, whereas it's very quick, and you see people making YouTube videos that are very quick like that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I wonder if there'll be a reaction to that, which we see in a lot of ways happen in cultures where the younger generation is reacting and creating work in a reaction against the previous generation, which tends to be actually a lot in line with the generation before their parents' generation. So will we see sort of a swing to more traditional media? I don't know. But you're not asking me to predict the future. You're asking me, how will they inspire? I think the underlying aspect of creativity will always be the same. Make something. The best way to make something is to sit down and do it. It's perfectly on it, and to screw up and to realize your mistakes. And that's one of the interesting things about self-publishing on the internet now, is that everybody sees your mistakes. And kind of like what I was saying with the story I did with Josh in between chapters here, I think for the most part, unless you're on specific sites or aiming for specific audiences, the response is going to be pretty helpful, encouraging. You'll always get the occasional jackass, but that's the internet. So what is, geez, that's a tough question. That's a really tough question. I think just telling people to sit down and make stuff, because the celebrities of today, even more so, are the people that are self-made. These YouTube video makers and podcasters and webcomicers and independent movie makers that are all just doing stuff themselves. Like, they are actually more more than we have for a long time, been a generation of self-made celebrity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what they're going to be telling the generation after it. You don't need expensive equipment. You need the newest iPhone, I guess, so you can have more megapixels. Do we still call them megapixels? I don't know. Mm-hmm. And just make stuff, right? I'm sure they'll have their own sort of iterations, make it quick, make it loud, make it funny, But I think that's still kind of the thing that my generation is actually having the hardest time adjusting to, just doing it, right? Because we hold some of these works to such high value. It's like, no, this is a genius that made this comic or made this book or made this movie, and they sat down and thought about it for forever, and it came out perfect in the first try. I'm like, no. I have an essay that I assign my students by George Orwell, the guy that wrote 1984 and Animal Farm. Yep. It's an essay called Why I Write. It was written before 1984, but my students are always astonished by the fact that throughout his in the essay, he says every novel I've written has been a failure, and also spent some time saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that he's terrible, he's a bad writer, and that he's not good at it, but he just keeps doing it. And it's really comforting for students to see that these people that we I don't know if there's the right word, but lionize, these people we canonize in high school and stuff like that they hated writing as much as students do, but they knew they could do it because they've done it before. And that's the only way you can know that you've done something, is to do it. Going back to Shia LeBouef, just do it, right? Yeah, I think that's going to be the main advice. Just get out there and make something, because that's how these creatives are hitting the world, and it's making a huge impact. So yeah, that's a good question. Whew, I'm sweating now.
You're not the only person that said it's a difficult question. I've asked that to about, oh gosh, must be at least 200 people or so, and wow. It's been interesting responses. Those 4 questions are part of the documentary Little Person Amongst Media Giants. So I'm still working on that film.
Excellent. It's a fantastic idea.
It's an ongoing process.
I know the feeling.
4 years in the making, and I'm still anyhow. It's those that help do the
just do it. Just do it.
I am, David. I am. Quit pressuring me, Shia. Quit it.
Right.
I have feelings, you son of a. Anyway. That's
let's just talk about Shia for a while. What is wrong? No, let's not do that.
I have to admit, the anime mashups for that has been hilarious.
It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, but that's something where you take a person that has had a lot of crap in his life,
right?
Or he's self-made crap for that matter, but he's found ways to still remain relevant. And this latest thing with the green screen has been what was it?
Right. Well, it's an interesting case, because he is making stuff, and if I'm not mistaken, he's even done comics. I think he actually came under fire a little bit. But he's an interesting iteration of this ideal. He's actually living what he's screaming. It might not be good. He might. That's another thing I actually heard, where I forgot where I heard it, but we do kind of live in this first draft generation, where obviously I said, don't overthink things, but it is good to plan. What is the purpose? What do you want to do with your work? And for me, I came across an idea back when I was getting my bachelor's degree, when I was taking this great books class, the early canon, and so like Greek stuff, Roman stuff, Old Testament stuff, and all the way through to kind of New Testament stuff, just looking at everything as literature. And I found this, we were talking about Roman poetry, and this Roman poet named Horace, and he had a phrase that he argued all art, and it is dulce, that is, every art should be sweet and useful to make people happy or make people feel a certain way. But if they walk away from it, something should stay with them. It's not necessarily a moral to the story, but is there something in what you're doing that has an embedded purpose? Whether it's what you intended or not, that doesn't matter. The artist's intent is not important. It's how it impacts the audience, what the audience takes away from it, that is important. And if you spend the time thinking about what do I want to say, then at least people will recognize that you're saying something, even if it's not necessarily what you want to say. That's a disconnect of knowing your audience and knowing what they need to hear in order to hear what you want to say clearly.
Right.
But this first draft generation, a lot of it comes through like, oh, I made this Vine, I'm going to put it up. And even though a lot of Vines are really well produced, a lot of editing is going to them, a lot of them are just reactions. We live in a very reactionary entertainment culture. And thinking about, I think some more thought needs to be put into, and I think that's kind of what Shia LaBeouf is doing. I think he's just kind of like, I'm going to record this monologue in front of a green screen. Let's just do it, right? And sorry if I blew out the sound there, but I think he could actually be doing some interesting things, but it really seems like he's not thinking about what he's trying to do. He's just thinking about how he's doing it and getting it out there as soon as possible, which has merit to it. But I think the internet, if it's anything, is saturated with a lot of first drafts. And I think at least another read through, another look at it, just another, like a thematic pass, right? You know what needs to happen, but let's think about like, what does it mean to the story? What does it mean to the characters? What does it mean to what you want to say? What do you care about, right? And might as well try to insert that in there. And you can do that from everything from heavy melodrama to high comedy. And Shia LaBeouf is I like his message, but I think it should have a caveat of just do it, but do it carefully. I don't know. I'm sure that could be said better. I'm sure Shia LaBeouf could say it better. But
maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, and it's a really interesting example of what is endemic to a lot of creative work right now. I'd say the internet. So exactly. Yeah, sorry for the detour there.
No, it's all good. What's funny is Jean-Claude Van Damme did something similar about a year back, where he, in his age, he put himself on a green screen, said, "Go ahead, internet, use me for whatever you want." So I want to find that footage and Shia LaBeouf and put it into something. I just figured that'd be hilarious. Awesome. Because with Van Damme doing his kicks and his sword work and his like shooting of a gun and all that other stuff and his acting, I think it'd be hilarious to match the two together.
You should do that, and you will win the internet Oscar. Yes, I promise. I gotta
find that now. I'm gonna work on that after we get off the show here.
Good. I'm glad we had this workshop together. We could hash things out,
bounce ideas off each other. Is there anything else that I haven't brought up that you like those that are watching this to know about?
No, just check out Long John. We're in the middle of chapter 2 right now. It's called Bird's Eye. And if you're interested in the book, you can obviously read everything online. But, I mean, volume 1 is for sale for a mere $7. Just go to longjohncomic.com. If you like butts, there's a butt on the front. Butts sell. I learned this at the one con I've gone to so far with this book. I'm like, all right, more butts. More butts, everybody. But getting a book for $7 with $3 shipping and handling, if you're in the continental U.S., will get you the book. It'll be signed. You'll get a sketch, and my never-ending or unending gratitude, undying gratitude. Yes, very morbid or not morbid. I'm not sure, but yeah. So check out the comic. It's something that I care about a lot. I've been thinking about a lot, and if you're interested, especially in sort of my creative process or how has this thing been getting done, I write a lot about that on the site. So be sure to scroll down and read what I'm writing about there. Excuse me. To kind of just hear me talk about things like the successes and the failures, even if they're just small ones along the way. So and thank you for having me on the show again. It's been a blast.
Anytime there, Dan. It's been far too long, like I mentioned previously, and it's good to have you back. And we got to stop doing this every 5 years or so. I've said that to many guests in the past, but let's not do it every 5 years. I kind of like you, I like to get you back on a little earlier than that. So.
All right. Well, I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind. I'll bother you every week from now on. It's like, hey man, I posted another page. Want to have me on? Huh? Talk about Shia LaBeouf some more. Huh? Transformers 3. What do you think?
Oh God. Let's not.
No, let's not go on that.
It's going so well, and then you had to.
I know. I'm a bad person.
Well, On that horrible note,
Yeah.
that ends this episode of Two Geeks Talking. Of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. As Dan said, though, check out longjohncomic.com. Buy his book number 1. Look for book number 2 coming out whenever that gets posted. I'm sure we'll have him on before that happens, because that would be awesome. As well as, check out the social medias that are on it. Check out his website itself. And there's a lot of great content overall. And you know what? Support him however you can, and that's the way to do it for any type of artist that you happen to like. Make sure you support them, because it is the arts, and we're not doing this stuff for free, not even this podcast. So help us out either way. That being said, that ends this particular episode. Tune in next week or whenever I have another show, because it is the summer and I have a feature film I have to help work on, so I'll be busy.
Nice.
Other than that, thanks everyone for listening, watching. Of course, you can see my work at twogeekstalking.com. You can get me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, Snapchat. They believe they're going to be all at Kurt Sasso or some version thereof. And thanks everyone for listening and watching, and see you next episode.